She was 21 and had been put out. No car, no deposit, no relative who would sign for anything. Nothing but a duffel bag and $10 in a coat pocket. And with that $10, she bought a forgotten observatory on a mesa in northern Arizona, a 20-foot steel dome, a stone building under it, and a 13-inch telescope. It has not been pointed at anything since 1974. The road up is 4 miles of unmaintained forest track. There has been no power to the site since 1981, and the county has carried it as a derelict since 2009. But what nobody knew was that behind the door of the vault, in a stone room built into the hillside under that dome, was something. Something that had been sitting in the dark for 51 years and would change her life forever. Before we continue, if stories like this mean something to you, hit subscribe. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Nedra Pike grew up in Winslow, Arizona, 90 miles from that mesa, and had never looked through a telescope in her life. Winslow is a town of about 9,000 on the old Route 66 alignment, and it has been getting smaller since the railroad cut its crews in the 80s. Her mother has been a housekeeper at 2 different motels in Winslow for 16 years. Her father drove for a regional carrier and left in 2019 and is somewhere near Albuquerque. Nedra graduated in 2023 and did 3 semesters at Northland Pioneer College toward a radiology tech certificate. She stopped in the 3rd one when the clinical placements turned out to be in Show Low. That is 70 miles each way, and she had a car that would not do it. She has been at a distribution warehouse off the interstate since, on nights, at $19 an hour. In March, her mother's boyfriend moved in. That is the whole of the story, and Nedra has declined to make it more than that. There was no fight. There were 3 adults in a 2-bedroom, and Nedra was working nights and sleeping days, which is the arrangement that breaks first in any house. She left in April. She was in a weekly rate motel on the highway for 9 weeks, at $310 a week. That is more per month than an apartment, and it is the trap everybody in that situation is in. The observatory came up in June because of a woman named Marguerite Slode who was in the warehouse parking lot with a dead battery and no jumper cables at 2 in the morning. Nedra had cables. That is the entire origin of everything that followed, and both of them find it slightly ridiculous. Marguerite Slode is 69. She spent 31 years as a variable star astronomer in Flagstaff and has been retired since 2020, and she was in Winslow that night because she had been out at a dark site with a portable rig. They talked for about 40 minutes in that parking lot. Nedra mentioned the motel. In the flat way, people mention it when they have stopped being embarrassed. Marguerite Slode mentioned, in the same flat way, that there was a dead observatory on Antelope Mesa. Coconino County had been trying to dispose of it since 2009 and could not. She had been up there twice, and it broke her heart both times. The county's problem is the one that made every property in this run available. There is no road worth the name, and no utilities. The demolition estimate starts at $40,000, because everything has to be trucked out over 4 miles of forest road. So the parcel is 11 acres, the transfer price is $10, and the buyer takes the structures, the taxes, and the access problem. Nedra signed in July at the county building in Flagstaff. Marguerite Slode drove her up and has been extremely clear that this was a lift and not an endorsement. The deed is 3 pages. It transfers 11 acres, 1 domed observatory building, 1 detached stone vault, and a frame residence described as uninhabitable, which it is. She paid with a 10 and got a receipt, and she has said the thing she thought in the car afterwards was that she had just made herself responsible for something, and she was not sure that was better. A 21-year-old on $19 an hour taking title to a derelict is a decision that can go 2 ways, and everybody involved knew it. What she had actually done, though nobody in that office understood it, and neither did she, is buy 51 years of somebody else's work. You have to understand what an observatory was before about 1980, because it is not what people picture. Nobody looked through the telescope. That is the first thing Marguerite Slode tells anybody, and it is the thing that surprises people most. From roughly 1890 until the 1980s, astronomy was photography. You put a glass plate in the telescope and opened the shutter. Then you tracked the sky for 20 minutes or an hour while the emulsion collected light your eye could never gather. Then, you developed the plate, and you had a permanent, measurable record of a piece of sky at a specific instant. Glass, not film, because glass does not stretch. If you are going to measure how far a star has moved, the thing it is recorded on cannot change shape. Every observatory in the world accumulated these. Harvard has about 500,000. Every one of them is a snapshot of a piece of sky on a night that will never come again. And every observatory had a vault, because a plate collection is the only irreplaceable thing on the site. A telescope can be rebuilt. A night in 1943 cannot. Antelope Mesa Observatory was built in 1928 by a private endowment out of Chicago, and it ran until 1974. The buildings are in better condition than they have any right to be, and the reason is the climate. Northern Arizona at 7,000 feet is dry. 14 inches of precipitation a year, low humidity, and the thing that destroys abandoned buildings everywhere else simply does not operate up there at the same rate. The dome is 20 feet across, sheet steel on a steel frame, and it still turns. Nedra and Marguerite Slode turned it by hand in July on the original rack, and it moved. The shutter is seized, and that is a genuine repair, but the dome rotates. Under it, the telescope is on its pier. It is a 13-inch photographic refractor on a German equatorial mount made in 1928. It is complete. Objective, tube, mount, clock drive, plate holder, all of it. The building under the dome is native stone, 2 feet thick, with a slate floor. The roof around the dome ring is intact. The plate vault is separate, 30 feet away, dug into the hillside, and built of the same stone with a poured slab and a steel door. That vault is the reason there is a story. It is also the reason the county never got anybody up there to look properly, because the door was locked and nobody had a key. The door came open on the 2nd of August with a locksmith from Flagstaff who charged her $90 and drove 4 miles of forest road to do it. Inside is a room about 14 feet by 20, stone, dry, with wooden racks floor to ceiling on 3 walls. The racks hold plate boxes, cardboard, about 10 inches square and 2 inches deep. Each one holds 4 to 6 glass plates in paper sleeves, and each is labeled on its end in ink. Marguerite Slode counted the boxes, and Nedra counted them again, twice, over 2 visits. There are 2,411 boxes in that room. Somewhere between 11 and 14,000 glass plates taken between 1928 and 1974 on a mesa in Arizona, sitting in a stone room that nobody had opened since the year the site closed. Marguerite Slode sat down on the floor of that vault. Asked what she was thinking, she gives the same answer every time. She was thinking about how many of these had gone into skips in the 80s and 90s. Because they were. That is the part that hurts. When the money went and the CC'd arrived, hundreds of small observatories cleared out their vaults, and the standard disposal was a skip. Marguerite Slode can name 4 collections she watched go that way in her own career, and has said she signed off on one of them in 1994, because there was nowhere to put it. That is the context for a stone room in Arizona with 2,411 boxes in it that nobody had touched. Survival is the exception. Being unreachable is the only reason this one survived. The collection is a survey, and that took about 10 minutes to establish, because the boxes say so. From 1929 to 1974, Antelope Mesa ran a proper motion survey. That means photographing the same set of star fields over and over across decades. Then you compare plates to find the stars that have visibly moved against the background. It is unglamorous and enormously useful. It is exactly the sort of thing a small, well-sited observatory with one instrument and a patient staff could contribute. The boxes are labeled by field and by date. Field numbers 1 through 41, and dates running across 45 years. Marguerite Slode's professional assessment, which she gave carefully and in writing, is that the survey plates alone are a significant collection that ought to be digitized, that this happens to a handful of such collections a year, and that it will not make anybody any money. She was blunt with Nedra about that on the first visit, because she has watched people get an idea about what an old archive is worth, and it is never true. Plates are not collectible. They are scientifically valuable, which is a different currency entirely, and it does not convert into anything a 21-year-old can spend. That is where this would have ended. A worthy dead archive on a mesa, a nice problem for a university. Except that on the third visit, working through the racks methodically, because she is methodical, Nedra found the boxes that are not the survey. On the bottom shelf of the third rack, in a run of their own, there are 311 boxes labeled differently. The survey boxes carry a field number. These carry a single word, the same word on all 311, and it is not a field number. It is a star. A designation, written out in a small, precise hand, identical on every box. 1 star. 311 boxes, about 1,400 plates. And the dates on them run from November of 1931 to March of 1974, which is 43 years. Nedra photographed a box end and sent it to Marguerite Slode at 11 at night, and Marguerite Slode rang her rather than texting back, which by then Nedra had learned to read as significant. The star is a real one. It is not famous. It is a 9th magnitude object in Auriga that you cannot see without a telescope and that has no popular name and never will. Nedra has looked it up since and can now find it in the sky with a chart, which she has done twice from the mesa with a borrowed pair of binoculars and not quite been sure she had it. 9th magnitude is faint. You cannot glance at it and know anything. That is the whole reason 43 years of glass exists. Marguerite Slode knew what it was inside about 4 seconds, because that is her field. And what she said to Nedra Pike on the phone at 11 at night is that somebody up there had been trying to catch an eclipse. An eclipse of what? Of the star. By its own companion. Marguerite Slode was already looking for her coat at 11 at night, 70 miles away. Nedra, how many boxes did you say? 311. There was a pause long enough that Nedra checked the call was still connected. Here is the thing that makes that sentence mean something, and it is worth the 90 seconds. Some stars are pairs. 2 stars orbiting each other, and if the orbit happens to be edge on to us, one passes in front of the other and the light dips. Most of these go round in days or weeks. You can watch one for a month and have the whole story. But a few have enormous orbits. The famous one is Epsilon Aurigae, which eclipses every 27 years and stays dimmed for almost 2. If you suspect a star is one of those, you have a problem that is not technical. It is a problem of human lifespan. You cannot prove it in a season. You cannot prove it in a decade. You have to photograph that star on every clear night for as long as it takes, keeping a consistent record. And then you have to still be there when it finally happens. And if you are wrong, you have spent your working life photographing a star that does nothing. That is what 311 boxes on the bottom shelf of the third rack represent. Marguerite Slode has said the thing about that shelf that she keeps coming back to, and she says it as a working astronomer rather than as somebody being moved. Nobody funds this. There is no grant on Earth that will pay a person to photograph one faint star for 43 years on a suspicion. It gets done by someone who has decided to do it and has an instrument and a mesa. And then, it does not get done. At all. The modern equivalent exists, and it is done by amateurs. There are people with backyard telescopes carrying long-term monitoring programs that no institution will fund, and Marguerite Slode spent a good part of her career working with their data. Her view is that Thaddeus Kelner was one of those, except that he had a professional instrument and a paid post and did it anyway, on his own time, alongside the job. The man is not a mystery, because observatories keep staff records and the endowment filed with the state until 1974. Thaddeus Kelner was born in Milwaukee in 1898 and came to Antelope Mesa in 1929 as the assistant. He became the resident astronomer in 1936, and he held that post until the site closed in 1974. 45 years on one mesa with one telescope. He never married. He lived in the frame residence beside the dome, the one the deed calls uninhabitable, and he died in Flagstaff in 1975 at 77. His published output is 11 papers, all of them on proper motions, all of them competent, and none of them remembered. There is nothing in the literature about that star. Not one paper. Not one note. Not one letter to a journal. Marguerite Slode has looked properly, which means she has looked in the places an amateur would not think of, including the observing circulars where people announce a suspicion so that somebody else can check it. He told nobody. For 43 years, on every clear night he could manage, alongside a survey that was his actual job, he photographed one faint star in Auriga and never mentioned it to a living soul. If you're enjoying this story, take a second and subscribe. It helps us keep making stories like this one. And tell us in the comments, what is the longest you have ever worked at something before you knew if it would come to anything? Halsey Kinch is 83 and lives in Flagstaff, and his father did the maintenance on that site from 1951 to 1970. He was up there most summers as a boy and as a teenager. And he is the only person Nedra has found who spent time with Thaddeus Kelner. What he remembers is not astronomy. It is that the man was on a schedule that made no sense to a 14-year-old. Halsey Kinch's account is that Kelner slept in the afternoon, ate at dusk, and was in the dome from dark until whenever the sky closed. Every night. Not most nights. He remembers being told once, when he asked why the man never came down to Flagstaff for anything, that you cannot get a night back. He did not understand it at the time and thought it was the sort of thing old men say. He has been up to that vault twice this autumn, at 83, over 4 miles of forest road, and he has said standing in front of 311 boxes rearranged what he thought he had been looking at as a boy. He was always up there, Halsey Kinch said. That's all it was to me. Old fella? Always up there. Did he ever say what he was doing? He said he was working. Halsey Kinch had a hand on the rack. You don't ask a grown man twice. He stood there a while. 43 years, he said. I used to think he had nothing else. And now? Now I think he had one thing. A plate is not data until somebody measures it. That distinction is the hinge of this entire story, and it needs to be plain. The glass records the sky. To get a number out of it, somebody has to put the plate on a measuring engine. Compare the image of your star against comparison stars of known brightness on the same glass. Write down a magnitude. It is slow, careful, tedious work, and it was traditionally the largest part of the job. Observatories employed people full-time to do nothing else. Thaddeus Kelner did his own. Every plate in that vault has a paper sleeve, and on the sleeve, in the same small hand, there is the date, the exposure, the seeing conditions, and the measured magnitude. 1,400 plates of one star across 43 years, every one of them measured and written up on its own sleeve. Marguerite Slode has been through the sleeves in chronological order, which took her 3 days spread over 5 weeks. For 41 years the number does not move. 9th magnitude, night after night after night, with the ordinary scatter you get from air and emulsion and nothing else. He photographed that star roughly 1,400 times, and it did absolutely nothing. And here is the thing that changes what all of it means, and Marguerite Slode found it on the third day and did not trust it for a week. The last box in the run is dated March 1974. The boxes before it are dated across the winter of 1972 and 1973 and into 1974, which is the normal cadence for that star in that part of the sky. Those final boxes hold 281 plates. And on every single one of those 281 paper sleeves, there is a date and an exposure and a note on the seeing. There is no magnitude. The column is blank, not smudged, not faded, never written. Every other plate in that run for 41 years carries a measured number in that small, precise hand, and the last 281 do not carry one at all. He took them, he developed them, he sleeved them, dated them, noted the conditions, and filed them in order in the vault. And he never measured them. Why he stopped measuring is not a mystery, and that is the part that is hard to sit with. The staff record is thin, but the endowment's last filings are not. In late 1972, Thaddeus Kelner was 74 years old, and the endowment was winding down. More to the point, Halsey Kinch remembers his father saying, sometime around then, that Kelner had stopped driving because of his eyes. Measuring a plate is not looking at the sky. It is close, precise work at a machine, comparing faint images by eye at high magnification, hour after hour. Photographing a star does not require good eyes. You point, you guide on a bright star through an eyepiece, you open the shutter for an hour. Measuring the result does. So for the last year and a half of his working life, he kept doing the half he could still do. He opened the dome, he tracked, he exposed, he developed, he sleeved, he dated, he filed, and the plates went into the vault unmeasured, in order, on the bottom shelf of the third rack, and the site closed in 1974, and he died the following year. Nobody made him keep going. The endowment was ending, the survey was finished, and a man of 75 with failing eyes had every reason on earth to stop opening the dome. He opened it 281 more times. Marguerite Slode's reading of that is the one Nedra has taken. He did not know the eclipse had started because he could not measure. But he knew it could start at any time, and he knew that a gap in the record is a gap forever. So he took the data for whoever came next, on the chance that there would be a next. There was no reason to believe there would be. The endowment was closing, the building was going to be locked, and small observatories in 1974 were being emptied into skips all over the country. Marguerite Slode measured the first of them in September on a borrowed microdensitometer at a facility in Flagstaff, with Nedra Pike standing behind her. She did the earliest of the unmeasured plates first. November 1972, because you establish your baseline before you look at anything interesting. It came out at 9th magnitude, exactly where it had been for 41 years. She was relieved, because it meant the plates were good and her method matched his. Then, she did one from June of 1973. The star is dimmer. Not marginally. Substantially, and well outside anything the scatter explains. She did 4 more from that summer, and every one of them is down. By the plates of late 1973, the star has dropped by most of a magnitude, which is roughly half its light gone. It stays down through the winter. It is still down on the very last plate in the vault, dated the 9th of March 1974. He caught it. After 41 years of a star that did nothing, in the last 18 months of his working life, the eclipse he had been waiting for since 1931 began. And the plates that show it are the plates he never measured. Marguerite Slode has been careful in public, and Nedra has taken the lead from her, so it is worth stating what is established and what is not. What is established is that the star was at 9th magnitude for 4 decades, and is roughly half a magnitude down across the last 18 months of plates, measured on modern equipment against comparison stars on the same glass. What is not established is that it is an eclipse. A star can dim for other reasons. The way you settle it is the same way he would have. You need the other side of the event, and the other side is not in that vault because the site closed before it happened. Which means the answer is in somebody else's plates. There were perhaps 40 observatories in the Northern Hemisphere photographing that region routinely in 1974 and 1975. Some of those collections survive. Some went into skips. Marguerite Slode has written to 9 archives. 4 have answered. One of them, in the Netherlands, has plates of that field from 1975 and has agreed to look. That is a real possibility, and it is also thin. Their coverage of that field is incidental. They may have 4 plates or 40. And the person who has agreed to look is doing it as a favor between other work. Nedra has been told not to expect an answer before spring and has stopped asking about it weekly. If it comes back the wrong way, or comes back as nothing, then what is in that vault is still a 43-year photometric record of one star and still worth publishing. It is just a smaller paper. Marguerite Slode has been careful to put that in front of Nedra more than once, because a 21-year-old who has staked something on an outcome should hear the downside from the person who knows it best. If the star is back at 9th magnitude in 1975, the thing Thaddeus Kelner suspected in 1931 is true, and there is a paper in it with his name on it. That is the part Nedra Pike will not let go of, and it is the only thing in 5 months she has been immovable about. The paper, if there is one, has his name on it first. Marguerite Slode's initial position was the ordinary academic one. The person who does the analysis is an author. The person who took the data 50 years ago goes in the acknowledgments, or a data citation, because that is how it works, and he is dead. Nedra's position is that a man photographed one star 1,400 times over 43 years and measured 1,300 of them himself by hand. He stopped only because he could not see well enough. If that is not authorship, then the word does not mean anything. They argued about it twice. Marguerite Slode has since said, without being pushed, that the 21-year-old was right and that she had defaulted to a convention rather than thinking about it. You'd have put him in the acknowledgments. I would have. That's what we do. He took the data for 43 years. I know what he did, Marguerite Slode said. I'm telling you I'd have done it wrong without you standing there. The working title on the draft has Kelner first and Slode second. Nedra has declined to be on it at all, and that has also been argued about. The building is the problem, and the numbers are not small. The vault is the good news. Stone, dug in, dry, and stable to within a few degrees across a year. That is better than most institutional plate stores manage with machinery. Marguerite Slode's written assessment is that the collection is safer where it is than in a lot of universities. What it needs is a door seal, a dehumidifier and power to run it, and monitoring. That package is $4,000, and the power is the hard part. The dome shutter is seized, and that is $11,000. The residence is beyond saving, and the estimate to remove it safely is $9,000. And it has to come out because it is the only thing on the site that is actually dangerous. The road is the number that ends conversations. 4 miles of forest track that a passenger car cannot use for about 5 months of the year, on Forest Service easement. Nobody is going to improve it. Nedra Pike is 21 and works nights at a warehouse for $19 an hour. She has $2,200 saved as of November. She now rents a room in Winslow for $480 a month. That is $180 less than the motel was costing her, and that arithmetic is the actual reason she is out of it. What is happening now is a digitization project that does not have money yet. 2 universities have expressed interest and a third has said no. The interest is real, but it is the kind of interest that moves at the speed of grant cycles, which is 18 months. Nedra has been told, repeatedly and kindly, that none of this pays her anything, and she repeats it herself before anybody can be tactful about it. What she does have is a task, and she has been doing it since August. Every visit, she photographs plate sleeves, not the plates, which needs equipment. The sleeves, which carry 43 years of a man's handwriting and are paper and are the fragile part. Date, exposure, seeing, magnitude, in order, into a spreadsheet she built herself. She has done 490 of the 1,400 in the star run. She has not started on the 11,000 survey plates and is aware that at this rate, that is a project measured in decades, which she has said she finds less daunting than it sounds, given who she is doing it for. On a Saturday at the end of November, on a day the forest road was still passable, Nedra Pike drove up to Antelope Mesa and did the ordinary things. She checked the tarpaulin over the seized dome shutter and the tape on the vault door seal. She swept the slate floor under the telescope, which does not need doing and which she does anyway. The telescope is under a cover she made out of a painter's drop cloth and elastic cord, which cost her $14 and is the single most effective thing anybody has done for that instrument in 50 years. Then she opened the vault, set up the little copy stand, and photographed 41 plate sleeves from the winter of 1958. Here is the part that is not about an observatory. In 1931, a man of 33 looked at a faint star nobody cared about and formed a suspicion he could not test. Testing it meant photographing that star on every clear night for as long as it took, with no way of knowing whether it would take 10 years or 50, or whether it would ever happen at all. He did it for 43 years. He measured 1,300 of those plates himself, by hand, one at a time, and every single one of them came back the same, and he went out the next clear night and did it again. Then his eyes went. And he kept going, doing the half he could still do, filing plates he could no longer read into a stone room in a hillside. And the thing he had been waiting for since he was 33 began, and it is on that glass, and he never knew. There is something you are doing right now that you will not see the end of. Raising somebody. Building something. Keeping a thing going that nobody has thanked you for. And the honest position is that you may never find out whether it came to anything. Do it anyway, and write it down as you go, because Thaddeus Kelner filed 281 plates he could not read into a vault on a mesa, and 51 years later a broke 21-year-old with a $10 deed opened that door, and the answer was still sitting there waiting. He did not leave a note. There is nothing in that vault addressed to anybody. He just filed the glass in order, the way he had for 43 years, and shut the door. That is the part Nedra Pike cannot get past, and she has stopped trying to explain it to people. He filed them in order. 281 plates he could not read, in date sequence on the correct shelf. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell us in the comments, what are you working on that you may never see finished? We'd love to hear your story. See you in the next one.